If you make beats in Studio One, then today I want to walk you through 5 of my favorite features that make production in this DAW a walk in the park. So I would say that Studio One is still one of the newest kids on the block when it comes to D.A.W.s, but I also think that it's super underrated because of the insane amount of functionality that you get for making music. I've said this before, and I'm not quite sure how accurate this is, but to me, Studio One feels like if FL Studio and Pro Tools had a baby, because not only is it really intuitive once you dive in, but it's also super powerful without getting too overwhelming. In any case, today I want to show you 5 of my favorite features that I use all the time for beat making and production that make my workflow a breeze. If you're more seasoned, you might already know about some of these features, and if that's the case, then do me a favor and drop your favorite feature down below in the comments so that we can all learn from each other. Now, if you aren't that experienced yet and you're at the beginning of your production journey looking for some guidance and clarity, then I want to give you a free gift today, friend, and that is my 6-step guide to producing a professional beat. This is a simple PDF guide that you can use as a roadmap to start crafting some beats of your own without breaking the bank in as little as 1 hour. So if you want that guide, all you have to do is click the first link down below. Okay, so starting off, we have macros. Now, these features are in no particular order except for this one, and that's because I honestly think this is Studio One's most powerful feature and hands down my favorite. So what is a macro? A macro, more or less, is an aggregate of functions. Simply put, it is a single command that is made up of a string of other commands that make doing a specific action a lot faster. So say, for example, that you want to duplicate a piece of audio, and then you want to select them both, normalize them, and then lower the gain on both by -3 dB. In any regular scenario, that would take at least 4 actions, but when you combine them all into a macro, you can do all of those commands with 1 button click. The possibilities here are endless, and I've spent a ridiculous amount of time crafting macros of my own to make my workflow as smooth as possible. If you're a regular viewer of this channel, then you know that I've even gone ahead and created my own beat-making macro toolbar for the piano roll that allows me to do things like program drums, chords, and manipulate MIDI in seconds. At the moment, I'm also testing a second toolbar for the timeline that brings together some of my most used commands, such as duplicating a VST with or without the events for easy layering, and even adding my favorite plugins to a track with a click of a button. So as you can see, the sky's the limit. Now, to get started with macros, you can go over to the top left here to where you see Studio One, click on that, and then click on Macro Organizer. Here you can see all of the macros that Studio One comes with by default, but of course, you could also create some here of your own as well. Now, basically the way this works is that Studio One comes with a bunch of different commands. So for example, if you take a look here on the left-hand side, you see them all. You could have something like delete range, copy to new scratch pad, go to next section. And what you want to be doing is you want to be adding them over to the right-hand side, the macro side, until you create a string of commands that will give you the desired result. Now, it does get a little bit more complicated than that because to get the actual result that you want does take a little bit of noodling around. And plus, you also have these things called arguments, which are basically just, do this when this happens or don't do this if this is happening kind of thing, but you get the gist. Now, as I just alluded to, the only thing that I will say is that making macros is not necessarily the easiest thing, but I definitely encourage you to dig deeper because it is absolutely a game changer and hands down my favorite feature in this entire program. If you want to get started with Studio One macros ASAP though, then I'll also make sure to leave my beat making macro toolbar link down below. Okay, next up we have the arranger track. So this feature can seem really simple on the surface, but the amount of value that it brings, at least to me, is insane. So as the name suggests, this is a tool that helps you arrange your track by labeling the different segments in your music. And to get started, all you have to do is go over to the top left here and click on this little button that says Open Arrange Track. From there, hover over the track itself and then press the Command key or the Control key on a PC, and you should get this little pen. From there, you can just go ahead and label that, draw the label over the section that you want. Finally, once you have that label added, you can right-click to change the name or to even change the color. So that is the basic function of the arranger track, but here's how I use it to speed up my workflow. So when I'm making beats, I like to create the chorus or the main part of the beat first, and then from there, strip things away to create the verses and everything else. Once I do that, I go ahead and I add a label over to my section, and then maybe just rename it using something like a macro. Now, the cool thing about the arranger track is that if you move a label, it'll also move with it everything that is underneath. So for example, this chorus here, I can bring this over and everything else will move. Now this is useful because now I made a space here for the intro, so I can just go ahead and add that label. use my macro here to relabel that. And then from here, I can go ahead and just press Shift D also to duplicate that over, or you can also hit the Option key on a Mac or the Alt key on a PC and drag that over however you choose. So let me go ahead and just, extend this over. Then I'm going to duplicate this again, but now we're going to call this a verse. Use my macro here to rename that. Maybe we also change the color. And let's say, from here I can start to strip things away to create the other parts. So maybe I don't want the stab here. Maybe, I don't want the clap on this one. And you start to kind of arrange your beat however you want to, and then just select both of these whenever you're ready. Shift D to duplicate again. Maybe you want a little bit of a breakdown that is similar to that intro, and then maybe you want another chorus. Another really useful thing that you could do with the arranger track is, let's say you make changes later on to, let's say, the first verse, right? So let's say you remove that verse lead. Let's say you remove the snares for whatever reason. Let's say you also remove some 808s. Instead of doing that exact same thing to the second verse, all you have to do is press that Option or Alt key on a PC and then just drag it over to override that second verse, and then it'll copy over all the changes. So as you can see, the point that I'm trying to make here is that the arranger track just makes arranging your beat or your song a breeze. Moving on, we have a feature that I use whenever I need to get inspiration, and that is the import song data feature. So this feature basically allows you to import any parts from another session into your current session and allows you to build from that. So let's say, for example, that you get stuck creating, but then you realize, hey, I really love the drums from that beat that I made last week, and you want to use that as a jumping off point. So to get started, go to the top here, go to Song, Import Song Data, and you can also see there's a little keyboard shortcut here, which is Shift-Command-I on a Mac. From there, go ahead and find the actual song file. So for me, that would be here. I think last week we did some, there it is. So you click on that, hit Open, and as soon as you do that, you're gonna get this little pop-up window. And what you want to do here is just select whatever you want to import over. So let's say, for example, that I do want only the drums, right? I keep everything in folders, which makes it really easy for me. So I'm just going to click on that folder for the drums, and it selects everything under that. I want the events. I want layers. Let's also bring over any automation. Why not? And then you could also copy the files to the song folder, so everything is in one place. Yes, I also want the volume and the panning, the insert, the sends, all of that. So once you're done selecting, hit OK. Give that a minute, and we should be seeing the drums here pop up. There it is. Now, the cool thing is that it even remembered the location of where I placed them based on that last session. So as you can see here in the first few measures, there is nothing because that was the intro, and it only comes in on measure 5. So this is really, really useful. Now, of course, once things are imported, you could change whatever elements you want. So let's say, for example, that I really don't want that second hi-hat. You can take things away and just start to build from there. This is also a really great option to use when collaborating. If another Studio One user sends you a session file, but you only want to keep, say, the lead melody and the percussion while doing everything else in your own template, then you can easily do that with this. Next up, we have the scratch pad. This is another simple feature, but extremely helpful for coming up with different ideas because it basically gives you a secondary timeline that you can drag MIDI events and audio files into without disturbing the main composition. So to access the scratch pad, all you have to basically do is go over to the top here and then click on this little button. This will open up that second timeline, and then from here, you can basically just take whatever you want from the primary one and then just drag it over. Now, the cool thing about the scratch pad is that the playback for it is completely isolated or separated from the main timeline. So if I'm here, I can play whatever I want, whatever I have on here, and that doesn't play anything from the original composition. And when I'm back on the original timeline, I can play from here without having to hear anything that is on the scratch pad. I use this feature a lot when I'm creating and I have different ideas for different parts and I just want to compare. You can use this feature for whatever you want, but for me, most of the time, I am using it whenever I want to come up with the different chord progressions or melodies and I want to see which one fits the beat the best. I usually create on the main timeline and then I'll select all of that, drag it over to the scratch pad just so I can keep it there for safekeeping. And then as I go throughout the beat, I can always reference that scratch pad to see if what I have is good enough or if I need to go back to that alternate version. Okay, last but not least, we have what I am calling music loop exporting. I'm not quite sure what the official name is. This feature essentially allows you to save a part that you have programmed from a VST anywhere on your computer and then bring that back while having Studio One automatically load up the VST, the patch, and any inserts that you might have added onto it. So here I have a little pad from last week's video, and it sounds like this. And let's say that I wanted to save this for future reference. All you have to do is go over to your browser. You could use an already existing folder, or you can create a new one straight from here, which is super cool. So I'm going to do new folder here. I'm going to call this sounds, hit enter. Now from here, all you have to do is click on an event that you want to save. Now, what you want to do is go ahead and select the entire expression of whatever you have programmed. For me, this one event is fine because it's just a 2-chord progression, which is contained within this event. But all you have to do is grab that event and then just place it on that folder. Now, before I let go, I want you to notice something. Here we have 2 options. It says export to sounds, which is a folder, but you have the option to export it as a music loop or a MIDI file because, yes, you can just export the MIDI and then save that for later. Now, if I press a shift button, I can go ahead and select that MIDI file option, but what I want to do is I want to select music loop. So I'm going to hit shift again and then let go. Now, to show you what it just did, I'm going to just delete this entire pad. And then I'm also going to delete this lead just because. So to recall this back, all you have to do is open up the browser again, find your folder that you have this in, and then just simply drag that in. Now, as you can see, not only did it bring up my MIDI, but it also brought up the VST that I had it in, the patch that I used, and even all the inserts that I had on this thing to make it exactly what it was. There are a ton of different ways to use this feature, but I find it particularly helpful for scenarios where maybe you created a beat and the overall beat is okay, but maybe you really liked a certain melody that you programmed and you want to bank that for later. This is also super useful for sound designers and loop makers. You could create a patch from scratch, write a chord progression to it so you have a good idea of how it sounds, and then save that entire chain as a music loop to bring back whenever you want. But there you have it, 5 of my favorite Studio One features for beat making and music production. Studio One has a ton more features, so it's impossible to cover everything in one video, but if you want to see more, then definitely let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to pick up my free 6-step guide to producing a professional beat. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you on the next one.